The first game that comes in mind when I think about difficult games is Cuphead. It looks like a 1930s cartoon with these smiling characters who are secretly trying to murder you. But Cuphead follows almost like a choreography. The attacks change a little from one run to another, but the overall structure stays the same. Every phase happens in a specific order, every transformation happens at the same point, and every boss fight is designed to be learned, which means that sooner or later you can memorize most of the patterns. So when you finally beat a boss, it doesn't feel like you got lucky, it feels more like you mastered the fight. But somewhere along the way, that idea of learning patterns started to disappear. Or maybe it didn't disappear, it evolved. Because if you look at a lot of modern action games, especially indie games, they feel completely different. Bosses don't always follow the exact same sequence anymore. They react to what's happening on screen. They react to your position, your timing, sometimes even the choices you make during the fight. Every attempt feels a little different. So, is that why so many modern games feel so much harder? And how did we end up here, especially in the Metroidvania genre? Personally, I don't think games have become harder. I think they've become smarter. At some point, developers stopped giving bosses a fixed sequence of attacks and started making them unpredictable. And it wasn't like every developer woke up one morning and said, from now on, let's make impossible bosses. Ideas spread slowly. One developer tries something new and another one builds on it. Then a game becomes a massive success and suddenly everyone starts looking in the same direction. And I think that's exactly what happened. Even before Hollow Knight, there was already a game that completely changed the way people thought about difficulty. Dark Souls. If a game is difficult, sooner or later someone in the comments is going to say, it's like Dark Souls. And there's a reason for that. Dark Souls didn't invent difficult games. Hard games had been around for decades. What it did was different. It made difficulty part of the game's identity. Every boss became a memory because it made you suffer. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why so many developers started chasing that same feeling. Then in 2017, Hollow Knight came out, and let's all admit it, the atmosphere is incredible, the soundtrack is incredible, the exploration is incredible, the whole game is incredible. But let's also admit something else. It's hard, and one of the reasons it's hard is because the bosses seem to react to what you're doing. They feel alive, they feel like they are making decisions. Of course, they're not actually thinking, they are following a set of rules, but that changes everything because now you can't just memorize every pattern, at least not all of them. And whenever an indie game becomes as successful as Hollow Knight, the same thing always happens. Everyone starts copying it. And this is where, in my opinion, a lot of Metroidvania started going in a slightly strange direction. Instead of asking, why did these bosses work so well? They started asking, how difficult can we make them? The problem is that difficulty alone doesn't make a boss memorable. In fact, it can easily become frustrating. Hollow Knight works because everything around those boss fights is incredible. The world, the exploration, the music, the sense of discovery. All of that makes you want to keep playing. It's not great just because the bosses are hard. It's great for 100 different reasons. If your plan is to make me die 100 times before I beat a boss, then your game better be close to perfect. Otherwise, I'm just going to quit and play something else. Let me give you a couple of examples that show why difficulty alone doesn't make a legendary boss. Mr. Freeze in Batman Arkham City is a perfect example. During the fight, he adapts to the tactics you've already used, forcing you to constantly change your strategy instead of repeating the same trick. Then there's Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid. He completely broke the fourth wall and surprised players with mechanics that people still talk about today. People still remember those bosses, not because they were impossibly hard, because they were clever. Sometimes I get the feeling that today's market rewards difficulty before it rewards creativity. And honestly, sometimes it feels like viewers just want to watch streamers lose their minds. But that inevitably affects developers too. After Vampire Survivors, dozens of similar games appeared. After Slay the Spire, roguelike deck builders exploded in popularity. After Balatro, developers immediately started experimenting with similar ways of reinventing card games. That's just how video games evolve. The problem starts when people copy the result without understanding the reason behind it. Hollow Knight didn't become a masterpiece because it had difficult bosses. It had difficult bosses because the rest of the game prepared you to face them. If you only copy the difficulty, you don't automatically get Hollow Knight. You just get a difficult game. So maybe the question we asked at the beginning of this video was the wrong one. Have bosses become impossible to beat? Well, I don't think so. They've become more ambitious. Sometimes for the better, sometimes definitely not. The problem is what always happens when one game changes an entire genre. Everyone tries to copy it, and sooner or later someone ends up copying the surface instead of the foundation. That's when you start seeing bosses with 3 phases just because that's what players expect now. Bosses that attack at lightning speed because players want a challenge. Personally, I don't think that's the truth. So let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.